Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I am so excited today to have Taylor D. Adams here with me. He is one president and storyteller of Scrapt Productions here in Raleigh, North Carolina, but you do stuff all over the place too. It's not just Raleigh.
Yeah, I happen to live here.
You happen to live here. You happen to be a resident here.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you are podcast host of Film Nuts.
Yeah, the Film Nuts podcast.
Film Nuts podcast, which by the way, love the branding of that because
thank you.
It's like takes you back to the animation you watched as you were kids. And I absolutely love that and how it's carried through the whole podcast.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I met an animator and illustrator through Discord.
Wow.
His name is Mudungwa Sibuhudi.
Wow.
I might have mispronounced his name. I go back and forth with him because like,
Yeah.
I really want to get your name right, man. And he tries to tell me he's from South Africa, and he tries to tell me that some of the pronunciations in his name are difficult to translate to actually English speaker. So that's the closest I can get to it. But he's great. And yeah, him and I become kind of internet friends. And then he's a very, very talented illustrator and animator. And so I was like, hey man, like I'm redoing, some branding for my podcast.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I want a squirrel like watching a movie. And he's like, bet, got you. So
he's like, say less.
Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah.
I have to make a shout out too. I always do this. Proud NC State alum too.
Yeah, that's right.
We both NC State. I always make the call out. I'm like, not UNC, not Duke. I was like, anytime I have NC State people on here, I'm like, yes, NC State.
Go Pack.
Go Pack. You graduated from there, bachelor's in communications. How did your story start and filmmaking, all of these different projects, storytelling? How did that begin for you?
Oh, wow. Well, it goes way, way back. Probably my first just introduction to movie making was probably like when I was 4. My cousin was making like a silly little like Godzilla terrorizes a Lego town, and I was dressed up, and I was like 4, and I was dressed up in like a Godzilla costume. It was just like knocking over all the stuff he had built out of Legos. But yeah, and it just kind of grew from there. Like eventually, like I was like a teenager, and I got my camera, started filming stuff, stupid stuff with my friends. Then when it came to like deciding what I wanted to do, like you got to go to college and get an education. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. And I was like, communication sounds vague enough. So what I want to do. Luckily, I'd say they have a specific concentration of communication media, which is still broad. But it was more catered toward what I wanted to do. And then after some ups and downs, I was able to get employed doing working in the storytelling and filmmaking industry.
Nice.
And now I'm here. So.
You actually went and worked for NC State and still, I mean, you still shoot for some of the NC State sports.
Sometimes, yeah. Now it's more of I'm what did I say? I'm not retired. I'm like on the I'm like on G League kind of like when they need somebody to like help out with a shoot. Yeah, exactly. They'll call me up, and I'm still friends with a lot of people that work there. And every once in a while, if I'm feeling just kind of bored or anxious or whatever, I'll text be like, hey, like, could I get a media pass to a game? I'll shoot, and you guys can just have the footage and do whatever you want with it. And so usually it works, and it's a lot of fun.
I would love just to be bored or not gonna be like, guys, can I get a media pass? Can I go to this pass?
Bored in the sense of like, okay, I've been working on this particular type of subject matter for so long, or I've been doing nothing but editing for 2 weeks straight. I want to like get my hands back on the camera. I want to get my hands back on a camera, make sure I'm still good at it, and then kind of just reach out and see what opportunities are there. But yeah, there are people that I know that still work there or around NC State are always really cool. And I'm always respectful. I'm like, hey, like if it's there, I'll take it. I'm not like trying to leverage my time there as like, hey guys, remember me? So yeah.
Now, hopping into Scrapt and Scrapt Productions, first off, can you set the stage for what you focus on, the creation, and then we'll get into the creation of why you went out and did your own thing?
Sure. Yeah. So the idea of Scrapt is kind of catering toward what I like to call the weirdos, the
Yeah.
punks, the misrepresented, um, people who I wouldn't necessarily like underrepresented groups,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
as a white man, I'm aware that like that's not who I
Totally.
am. So I don't want to act like I'm trying to uh, gain something by
Yeah.
hopping on some kind of DEI
Yeah.
trend. But it's very holistic in the sense that for me, like I've always felt some of the ideas that I've had or some of the
Yeah.
perspectives I want to portray have been kind of thrown away or tossed aside. And so
Yep.
that's where the idea of Scrapped actually came from.
Okay.
Ideas that would be scrapped
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yep.
And so focusing on that, I want to let, and outside of subject matter,
Yeah.
there's an attitude that kind of comes with what we do.
Yeah.
Like we don't necessarily need permission to like make the thing that we're
Yep.
making. But we still put a lot of care
Yes.
into what we're doing, and to
Yeah.
make sure that everything is authentic. As much as I hate that as a buzzword,
Yeah.
it's very much kind of what the company is about.
And I love the phrase that you guys have. I just want to make dope shit.
Yeah,
Like
it's
I
true.
absolutely love that. Because I think to the point you were just making about Scrapped and the projects that sometimes get overlooked and sometimes people just don't want to make, but you turn it into dope shit, which is also like I just love that. And I love that that's
Thank
like
you.
the headline on the website too. I was like, yes, we do want to make dope shit.
Like I think for I say us, it's people that I work with.
Yeah.
Technically on paper, it's just me. But when I work with the people that I want to work with, that I
Yeah.
enjoy working with, that is like when you distill everything down, can I curse?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
that's the fucking point of what
Yeah.
we're doing is we
Yep.
just want to make something that we really, really like
Totally.
making with people that we care about.
Yeah.
And kind of going back into the sense of having an attitude, that's
Yeah.
kind of like combining those two things. It's like,
Yeah.
look, what do you want to do? We just want to make cool stuff. Like
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
basically what we want to do.
Yeah.
And in all different arenas, like at times we might seem like a little unfocused because
Yeah.
we'll do something in sports or something in food
Totally.
and drink or
Yeah.
something in media or whatever. But at the essence, like what really the connecting tissue of all that stuff
Yeah.
is culture, is stuff
Yeah.
that we can like I can connect to you with, and you can connect
Totally.
with the guy who just drove by outside. It doesn't matter. Like it's the things that connect us as
Yeah.
opposed to divide us.
Yep. When I was just about to ask you too on the projects you do work on, because you've worked with STEM Media too, who we've
Yeah.
had Nehemiah on here, and have done work on those projects, which I was lucky enough to be there one day and act as PA, but that's been a
Oh
fun.
yeah, I heard about that. I wasn't on set
Yes.
for that one.
Yes,
But yeah.
yeah. I think you and Nehemiah were there the day that I couldn't be there, the day beforehand or something, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, they were doing the episode. They were doing two episodes of Hungry Planet, one on sweet potatoes and one on tomatoes.
Yes.
And they were going to film when I was going to be out of the country. And they said, "Hey," or our showrunner said, "Hey, by the time we get to Raleigh, tomatoes won't exist. Can you
Yeah.
go to Raleigh City Farm and just film B-roll of tomatoes
Okay.
for 2 hours?" And so I went. This is like a month before they actually shot the episode.
Oh.
So I went and just hung out at Raleigh City Farm for like 2 hours shooting
Nice.
beautiful shots of tomatoes.
Yes.
But yeah, I heard you were on there, and that's cool.
Yes, I was there for the tomatoes day,
Mhm.
and it was great to learn from them. And of course, I had was emailing Nehemiah. I was like, we haven't officially met in person
Yeah.
yet. I was like, so when we finally sat down to record, I was like, great to finally see you in person.
Yeah, he's great. I love working with him.
Yes, but so like the topics you do work on, like the wide array. We were even just talking about Angela's podcast, Honey and Hustle, and you were saying that's learning. Like, are you just continuously learning from all of these different things, or is there something you haven't done yet that you want to go?
Yes, constantly
Yeah.
learning. I feel like, I don't know who originally said it, but my mom has said, if you learn something new every day, you won't die ignorant.
I like that.
So I don't know. I don't know if she made it up or it came from somebody else.
We're gonna say she came up with
Yeah,
it.
sure. Why not? Shout out, mom. But yeah, like that's kind of the point of existing. I feel like it's just like learning stuff, because if by the time we're 18 we know everything, it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it comes to the different subject matters and stuff, it's great to just be constantly learning about stuff.
Yeah.
Like I've worked on other stuff for STEM media, like involving how to how to develop a speaking
Totally.
career or a side gig. And I'm like, I'm not a public speaker.
Yeah.
Sometimes half of my living is asking people questions.
Yeah.
So I feel like, oh, that's an interesting skill. Like,
Yeah.
let me help out editing with that. And then
Yes.
as I'm editing, I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool little nugget that they're
Tidbit.
talking about.
Yeah.
I'll hold
Yeah.
on to that one.
Yeah.
And same with editing Angela Hollowell's podcast with Honey and Hustle. Like she focuses on entrepreneurship,
Yep.
which I technically am, but I don't consider myself that.
Yeah.
Like I consider myself more of an artist.
Okay.
But I do, like, we all need that kind of insight and learning
Yeah.
and to advance our careers in one way or another,
Yes.
whether incrementally or exponentially.
It was funny that you just brought that up because that was going to be a question of mine. Like, in terms of, do you consider yourself an entrepreneur and what it has felt like to sit in that seat of like, hey, I kind of control everything now with Scrap Media,
Mhm.
the Scrap Productions, and I have to, even though it's just you, I have to take care of making sure I'm paying myself. I have to
Yeah.
send out invoices.
Yeah.
Like, how does it feel to be, sitting in that seat?
Um, Feels fine. That's not the answer you're looking for. It's just
No.
I never sought out to be in a position where I was running my own
Totally.
business. The word business wasn't even in my professional vocabulary as
Okay.
I was developing what I wanted to do. It was very much centered around art.
Yeah.
And going back to the latter part of your question about other things that Scrapped or myself might want to
Yeah.
do, that kind of goes hand in hand because I'm learning to be more of an entrepreneur, or at least
Okay.
accept the responsibility of that more
Yeah.
because I'm realizing that what I want out of my career and my
Yeah.
life is to continue to make things. And a lot of times, what happens is you can't rely on clients to pay you to
Totally.
then do the thing that they want.
Yep.
Which leads me into looking into more of like, okay, I want to make this documentary. How do I get it funded?
Totally.
Who do I have to talk to? What do I have to put together? I want to work on a TV series or a feature film. What do I have to do
Yeah.
to get that financed or to get that out into the world? And
Yeah.
so that's where kind of the entrepreneur, which is even, I can't even say the word.
It's not an easy one to say.
Who came up with that word?
And even if you go to try to say entrepreneurial, I'm like, that just doesn't roll
can't
off the
spell it. I try to type it out, and my email corrects me every time with the red squiggle. I'm like, eventually I'll learn how to spell this word. But yeah, but those kind of like business mindsets.
Yeah.
I'm learning to accept a little bit more and learn more about
Yeah.
in order to get where I want to in my career of making stuff that I think is really important with people that I care about.
Yes. It's funny because people are like, oh, you just work with clients and post stuff on social media. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, we have it.
I mean, yeah,
sure.
but
If we want to get really fucking simple with things, sure. But like you kind of go into this and it's been massive learning where you're like, okay, you got to get on email threads. You got to do some of this administration stuff that you're like, I kind of don't want to do all this stuff. I'm like, I want to go create and talk to people and shoot stuff. So it's kind of that I always say it's the balance of the fun and the admin stuff at the same time that you're trying to figure out.
Yeah,
it has to be done.
Yeah, it's definitely more of the admin stuff. Every once in a while, like if I'm burnt out, I'd be like, yeah, cool, I'll just send emails all day. Or I'll be like, okay, have I done my taxes this year? Like shit like that. It's just, the boring stuff. Sometimes I relish in the boring stuff because it adds a little bit of a breather in between things. But learning how to be, I don't want to say like visionary, but could use that term. Just like, okay, this is what I want to do, but how do I get to that point? And it's not a creating skill set that I'm lacking. And even though I'm constantly wanting to improve in that, it's more of like, okay, what are the things that I don't understand that I need to learn in order to get the stuff that I want to make out there into the world.
That's been even little pieces for me. I'm like, okay, I want to go do like start making sure I'm sending out a newsletter to people or things like that. And so then I'm like, how do I go do that though? I'm like, what is the best way? So it's all these little pieces that you kind of are like, once you have things established, so you're like, okay, we can go add on, we can go do some other things. But to your point, I'm like, I got to go figure out how to do this. How do what's the best way to work? What's the best platform to use? So it's continuously doing research on everything and every platform you could possibly be using right now.
Yeah, for me, it's figuring out when to do that. Not that I don't have, not necessarily don't have the time, but when should I do that? Like, should that actually be the bulk of my day? And then I do creative stuff at night, or should I do creative stuff during the day when I have more energy, and then do like the boring research stuff at night?
Totally.
You know, then like 10 rolls around, and I'm like, I just want to watch an episode of TV and go to bed.
I'm like, I gotta get up tomorrow and do this all over again.
Nothing makes me feel more worthless when I receive a text or an email from one of my clients at like midnight or 12.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, they're up working. What the fuck am I doing? Granted, they're doing that so that later on they don't have to, but I understand because I've been in that situation too when I was running a show where I was like, sometimes I would get home at 3:30 a.m. and then have to be up at 6:30. Like, I've been in that situation before.
Totally.
So, and part of me misses that. There was a really great video essay. I don't remember the essayist who did it, but there was a really great video essay on the show The Bear, where it talked about the difference between distress and this concept called eustress, spelled like EU stress. And the fact that people thrive off of stress as opposed to feeling overwhelmed and have a sense of despair with the distress. And I thought it was very fascinating.
I relate to that because I'm like, I'll sit in bed and I'm like, how late is too late to send an email to people?
Never too late for an email.
Yeah.
For me, never too late for a text, because for me, I don't mind when I get late night texts, because at 11, I hit do not disturb.
Okay.
And so if I happen to be still on my phone, it'll show up. But yeah. And then
someone's bothering me.
Yeah, that's fine. Actually, Angela, like, if I get a text from her at 8 a.m. on the dot, I know she sent it at like 2.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Shout out to Angela. Angela, you can send those at 2. That's fine. I'll wake up to it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I wake up at 6. It's fine.
She warned me when I was doing production assistant work with her. She was like, I'm gonna send you text. She's like, you don't have to look at it right when I send it to you if it is too late at night. And I said it's fine. I said, I'll answer no matter what. I said, it's how it is.
That's my mentality. Like, I will definitely send texts to people at all hours of the day or night, but I only expect them to respond when they want to. Like, you know, if I send something at 10:30, I don't want to hear back from you at 10:31 if you don't want to. Like, I'm fine waiting till noon the next day. Like, it's totally cool.
I have the same I have one of my best friends is a teacher, and she's like, I'm so sorry I didn't respond to this last night. I said, Morgan, I knew you were asleep. I said, I sent it to you just because I knew I was going to forget it, and I knew you were going to see it at 6:30 in the morning and would respond to me when you had time. I have no inclination of people actually responding. Yeah. If they aren't up, don't want to at that time, whatever it may be. Yeah. But I'm like, I need to get it out, because if not, it's gone from my mind.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah. But I also at the same time, I do a lot of research and trying to figure out, in terms of timing, when is good to post stuff, when is good to send things out.
Like on social media?
On social media, newsletters, emails out to contacts and things like that to try to promote stuff. That's where I get deep in the research too, because it's the behaviors of people and what time. Like, do you wake up in the morning and what's the first thing you do? Are you getting on social media or are you checking your email? So it's interesting to kind of learn the behaviors there and how it affects certain business aspects and how you can really tap into those things. Yeah. I go down that rabbit hole.
Well, if you learn anything, let me know. Yeah. I don't know shit about it. I feel like the algorithm is always against me, because that's not chronological anymore. Excuse me. It's not chronological. No. It's like, oh, this algorithm's going to decide if other people want to see a photo or a link or words or something else.
Well, to that point, every person's different. Like, even when you listen to a podcast, some people want to listen, some people want to watch. Yeah. And I'm like, oh God, we have more we have to do now
Yeah.
to make sure we're meeting people.
Yeah. And when I started the this current season of Film Nuts, we're about to come back from a mid-season break, but I started incorporating more video. Like they're all on YouTube, but it's literally just like the thumbnail and then the audio is playing under it.
Okay, got it.
But a lot of people were like, we really like watching podcasts. And I was like, okay, is it a podcast? That's a whole other discussion of like, what is
it's
podcast?
like we need to bring Angela in and have this conversation with her. Yeah.
It's more like, I think of everything as kind of, if it exists beyond an audio platform, to me, it's a show, plain and simple. It could be a talk show. It could be something more journalistic. It could be whatever. But just because you're using different language doesn't change the definition of like what it is.
Yep.
So when we started incorporating more video, I was like, okay. And then some people will just like, they'll actually only listen, but they still want to use YouTube because it's just like the most readily accessible. You don't need it's not a, it's not Spotify versus Apple Podcasts. It's like everybody uses YouTube. So just hit play and do whatever. And when I started incorporating more video or making it more centric, I was having more fun with it because I come from a video background anyway. So I was like, oh, if I'm going to do this, like, okay, well, I can play a little bit with the timing. If I have like a nice, like 4-second buffer in between or 3-second buffer between the music fades out and conversation fades in, let me put like a graphic up and has a little bit of motion to it as opposed to just, nothingness or something that's still and not moving.
Yep.
And you can play around with B-roll too. Like on our podcast, we talk about the movies and shows that our guests love and why they love them, hoping to reveal something about themselves. And then that leads to connection between the listener and who our guest is. And you can play with B-roll. Like they could be talking about a scene they absolutely love and they're describing the scene. And as they're describing the scene, I can show it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now it has a different layer. But at the same time, you could just listen on Spotify or Apple and you get the same effect, especially if you've hopefully seen the movie or the show that they're talking about.
Yeah. Now, I want to get into the Film Nuts podcast. And first off, why that, like, I'm always interested in why people choose the topic that they choose for their podcast. Why this particular topic of films, movies, TV shows?
Right. I think, well, TV and movies are just, I think everybody just says, oh yeah, I've loved watching movies or shows since I was a kid. For me, it was a lot more because I felt like I gravitated more toward how they worked. Like I would come home, there's always that like a sense of escapism. Like I've had a hard day. I'm going to go home and put on The Office or whatever. And that's it. It's on, it's taking them away from whatever troubles they had. Sometimes that was me, but also like I would come home from school and like put on, I think it was usually, I put on TBS and it was either Home Improvement or the Drew Carey Show.
Yes.
And I would just like watch it for like half an hour, an hour, and then I would like do my homework. But I started noticing like how the jokes worked or the pacing of stuff. And like all that inner workings really fascinated me because I was like interested in like making movies. And that's probably why. But what I discovered is that I had a previous podcast with a friend of mine and him and I would just like, it was kind of like a movie review or a TV show review podcast. And it was fun. But what I really realized that I really loved is learning about why people like stuff, because anybody can be like, I didn't like this because it sucked. And then they explain why they didn't like it. But that's not the definition of it's bad or it's good. It's how you feel about it. And a lot of review podcasts are like that. And the fact that their opinion is presented as fact. But they're not saying that it is. But the language they used is this movie is bad. Not I thought this movie was bad.
Right.
And for me, I wanted to learn more about why people love what they love and what that might say about them. I think we have like 45 episodes of the show. And one of the ones I always come back to is we did an episode on the movie called Lucky Number 11. Have you heard of it?
No.
Okay. It's kind of a fun, quirky action Guy Ritchie kind of thing.
Oh, I love me.
It's not Guy Ritchie, but it's like similar.
I love
it's that
Guy
vibe.
Ritchie-esque. Yes.
And the guest we had on was a hip hop artist called The Deep End, and in him talking about, shout out Malcolm, in him talking about why he loved this movie. He realized he gravitated toward a particular character because the character's mentality was a mentality he adapted
Mm,
after he had lost a loved one.
mm.
And so, in that sense, it becomes kind of a therapy session. And that's not the goal of it. But
Yeah.
when you get a deeper sense of why somebody likes,
Yeah.
loves, or doesn't like or love something,
Yeah.
like you get a better sense of who they are. And then you can kind of like connect with that person and then have a better understanding of that movie um,
I like
in a
that.
way. And so that's why it's more of like, it's a lot about nuance.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what life is anyway. Like
Yeah.
there's no black and white with a lot of stuff. It's like you have to take into account the nuance. And so that was my intention with this.
Yeah.
Although at the time I launched it, I didn't realize that was my intention. The time I launched it, it was 2020,
Oh yeah.
peak of COVID.
Yeah.
I'm bored. I'm not seeing
Find something to
anybody. I
do.
want to talk to people about
Yeah.
movies and TV shows.
Yeah.
And so that's why I started from there. And then it's just kind of evolved into we've had some really great guests. We've had some really great movies and shows. We've played around with the format. I did one episode on Star Wars: The Last Jedi, where I went to people's houses and I talked to them about like why my friend hated it,
Yeah.
why my other friend loved it, and then I had people all over the world on the internet submit sound bites of why they hated it or loved it, and I interwove it into one episode, and that was really fun to do. And so I'm hoping to do something like that a little bit more, but like playing with the format. It was kind of like I'm trying like I listen to a lot of like NPR or serial podcasts, and so I like that storytelling format of not doesn't have to necessarily be a conversation. It can be it can exist outside of it with different elements to add to the art form and the message of what we're trying to convey.
Okay. In the same way that you're talking about movies and TV shows, I think music relates in there too, because people like I've had a lot of conversations with people of a song means something different for every single person.
Oh yeah.
And we all have comfort movies, but they're comfort movies for a particular reason to that person, and it's different for every person. So, but I love that you go into those conversations, because so many like three people might have the same favorite TV show or movie, but it's all three different reasons in terms of why they love those, and every story's different. So I love that you have those conversations and get into the nitty-gritty of it as well, and have that focus of, because I love watching I always come back to Hard Knocks, and I'm like, I sit there and I'm like, I love to figure out like the sequences of it all and the editing process. And I was lucky enough to talk to Heidi Bank, who is part of the NFL Films crew.
Oh, nice.
And the editing crew. And I was like a kid in a candy shop. I was like, how did you do that? And she was like, here's how I did it. And I was like wide-eyed. But I sit and I watch stuff. I'm like, how did you do that? Especially when it's kind of that documentary style thing. I'm like, what goes into that thought process, that shot list, everything. That's where I kind of sit there and I'm analyzing everything that I'm seeing. And it's so interesting. I think NC State stuff too. That stuff, the one, when we do it with NC State football, that stuff, I'm like, okay, yep. Yeah. I'm watching this and I'm just like, how do we do this?
Do you know that I started that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. Yeah, that was a ton of fun.
Okay, tell me about it. I want to hear everything about this. Oh my god. Okay. Because I love it.
It's gonna be a 2-hour podcast. So I'll start real quick with the impetus of it. I was working for Learfield, which is the marketing entity, collegiate marketing entity, specifically Wolfpack Sports Properties, which is the NC State branch of it. Yeah. And they have a contract with Capital Broadcasting to create a half-hour TV show, weekly TV show. Yep. For the longest time, that TV show has always been the same. Like throughout college athletics, it was always the head coach's name show. That's always what it was. And it was always kind of a talk entertainment show where the radio host or a TV host or just personality associated with NC State athletics would interview the coach, be like, hey, how about that game? They talk through it. Yeah. And then there might be some like a feature on a player or then like something fun. And I did that for 3 years. I worked on the show 2 years prior to that as like a camera operator, but then I ran the show for 3 years. and then I was bored, um, and tired and burnt out because
I
I was
can
also
imagine.
actually there, one year I was actually producing two shows simultaneously. There
Oh
was
my
an
God.
overall athletics TV show and then a football specific one,
Yeah.
followed by a basketball specific one once the season changes.
Okay.
So I took a year off. It wasn't an intended year off. I just
Yeah.
walked away, do freelance stuff. And during that year, 2016, is when Last Chance You came out on Netflix.
Yeah.
And that really inspired me because I love the way that Greg Whiteley and his team just portrayed sports.
Yeah.
Very raw and grounded and
Yeah.
ambient, which I loved. Lots of wide shots and
Yeah.
stillness. And I love that. And I was like, oh man, I want to come back and I want to do this.
Yeah.
And so I was able to, and that was great. I came back, I pitched the idea, everybody loved it, hopped on board. And so I did that for 3 years. And making the first show was a lot harder than I thought it was. I think by the end of I edited everything, I was like 3 minutes shy of the
Oh.
runtime. I was like, what do I do? Uh, and so I like just kind of like put some highlights and stuff and
Yeah.
maybe like reiterated some sound bites
Yep.
from the beginning to the end to try and emphasize some stuff.
Yeah.
But after that first show, I got a better help on it, and that was a ton of planning. Like we didn't have the luxury of filming for 5 straight months and then
Totally.
finding the story. It was we have to have an idea before we even start
Yeah.
anything, and then we have to adapt as we go because the total production time of each episode was 6 days.
Yeah.
Like we had to produce a half-hour documentary
Yeah.
every week for 30 weeks,
Yeah.
and that was tough. But it was a ton of fun. Took a ton of collaboration
Yes.
between me and the other video people that worked at NC State,
Yeah.
as well as like some student helpers, and then also like the sports information directors that worked at the schools,
Okay.
the head coaches, the assistant coaches, the
Yeah.
players. Everybody had to be on board with the project,
Yeah.
and I'm very glad that it's still running. One of my really good friends, Roland Delory, is the one who's currently running it,
Okay.
and he's doing a bang up job with it.
Love it. When as you were just saying that, like, you are seeing every single piece of that week, including practices, every single piece of training leading up to the game, whatever it may be. And then you kind of like it's out the next day. It is out, and you're like, and it
Yeah.
never in my mind was I like, oh, they've been like, no, you guys were putting this whole thing together in a matter of 6 days. And I was
Yeah.
like, like I was always amazed watching it. Like you had the greatest shots too of like outside the training facility with the fountain and everything, and you had, like you were saying, those wide shots of like the peaceful moments before the music gets turned on and you hear Coach D yelling at everybody. But it is like I can't even imagine what that turnaround is like and what that process is.
The turnaround is tough. The toughest part is Saturday to Sunday, because usually the game is on a Saturday,
Yeah.
and let's say it's a night game and it's
Mhm.
away, and then you get back into Raleigh at 3:30,
Yep.
and you haven't edited the game at all. The idea was before Saturday,
Yeah.
3/4 of the show was done.
Okay.
So we shoot a little bit on. Go back and break it down. So on Mondays is usually a press conference day. I
Yep.
film the press conferences. Then we also did head coaches interview, and assistant coaches interviews. And then I'll take another couple hours and just kind of like really roughly chop it up
Totally.
and maybe place it. I divided the show into 4 different sequences for each segment, but okay,
Yeah.
this will be a good open. Put it here. This might be good right before the game. Put that here. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is like alternating and simultaneously shooting practice, shooting another interview, and then labeling all the footage and then cutting
Yeah.
everything up. And usually by the time Friday rolls around, we're done editing as much as we can.
Okay.
And then we have Saturday for a game, especially if it's a road game. We have to be done by
Yeah.
Friday because we're on the road. And then Sunday rolls around and it's like, okay, we have to make sure by the time the beginning of Sunday has started that everybody's footage has been logged and labeled so that I know what I'm looking for. And it's very much a group effort. Like I am the only one, or I wasn't the only one. Currently, the showrunner of the shows is the only one paid to make it.
Oh.
Everybody else is helping because that's the nature of this
Totally.
piece. Like that's where the budget lies. I can see maybe down the road there's a bigger budget where there's like more people working on just this thing, but there has to be a lot of investment. But a lot of the investment comes from like emotional investment, like, hey, I'm working with like 3 camera people who are employed by NC State and are not paid to make the show. But I'm like, hey guys, like this is a really cool project. So I think we should all work together to make this, because I'm going to use your footage and you're going to use, we're all shooting the same thing. We're all working toward the same goal, is to benefit whatever program we're working on. We could be at another school, we could be with another sport, doesn't matter. That's where the collaboration comes to effect. There has to be a complete buy-in into the mission of the project, but there has to be respect too, not like you need to do this for me because you need to. That doesn't fly. There needs to be open communication, there needs to be collaboration, and there needs to be like a common understanding. Usually before the football season would start, I would have the people who work on the show with me in an unofficial capacity. My partner and I would have them over for dinner, and we would just have like, it would be a big meal of 8 people. We would just like get together and bond and stuff like that. And I feel like that going the extra step of connecting with the people you're working on a project outside of the project is important to complete the project. If that makes sense.
Yes.
I feel my voice getting hoarse. I'm talking so much.
I always, when I watch these episodes and the player interviews that you did, I would always watch and I'd be like, these people are fucking psychic, because it ended up being that the part in like when we get to game time, I was like, those players had some sort of massive impact in those games. So I'd sit there, I'm like, these people are psychic. I was like, these people are predicting what this game is.
Thank you for that. But the last year I ran it, we had kind of a Madden curse. Like I would interview somebody and then they would get hurt in the game. Not like they would get hurt in the middle of the game and get carted off. It'd be like they would like land weird and then they'd be out for like 2 games or something like that. Nothing was ever like crazy,
like broken
awful.
limbs or anything like
nothing
that.
ever like that. But something, the last season I ran the football show, we had 3 episodes in a row that happened. I was like, I hope nobody's scared to be on this show. Because this isn't the reason, but superstition is strong in any sport.
Yes, that it's very true. Yes, there is. Anything that you want everybody listening to know that you have coming up? Second half of the podcast, do you have a date for it? What do you have going on?
We don't have a hard launch date for the second half of the 4th season of Film Nuts, of the Film Nuts podcast, but as of this day, the 21st of February, we will begin filming new interviews inside of a week and a half. And normally we do a batch within a couple weeks. And then we put them out. So I don't have a hard date, but I anticipate new episodes of the Film Nuts podcast coming out at the end of March, early April. Nice. Yeah. So I don't know when this is going to air, but that's the window.
Middle of March.
Okay, cool.
So perfect. Awesome. Perfect timing. Right there, right close to it.
Excellent.
Do you like batch recording like that? Like, do you?
Depends. I think if I had other, like if I had a bigger team and a better scheduling process, I think I would love to do like record this Wednesday, put out next Wednesday. And I did that for my first season, but life gets in the way when you don't do it like that. So if I do like to do batches. I did do one season where I did 8. I recorded 8 inside 4 weeks, and then I released them like in every other week. Like I was done recording and then I just released them. But I think I like doing individual batches. So I'll probably do like 4 or 5 within like 2 weeks. And then put them out as they're coming out. I'll record some more and just kind of like keep going until I feel like we've had enough for the season or something like that. So
I have people who are like, I can only do 1 recording for the week, like it's just a lot. And I'm like, I can probably do 2.
Yeah.
And at that point, because like you want to make sure in certain capacities, whatever your topic is, you want to make sure you have information about the guest. You want to make sure, like, if it's in person or over Zoom, you got to make sure all the equipment's ready to go. You got to set up. You get like, it's a lot. It's a full blown production that people are like, you're just having a conversation. I'm like, oh dear God.
Yeah. I'm not having somebody over for coffee. I'm like asking them about, a little more detailed stuff. But at the same time, it's gotta appear casual. So yeah, you get it.
My last question for you, Taylor, is just what inspires you?
Oh, oh man. Uh, Good question. I have a lot to choose from.
Mm.
But one, I would say one of the things that's recently inspiring me, like right
Yeah.
now, is listening to different kinds of music that I don't normally listen to or gravitate toward.
Oh,
Um, so I'm very much like a rock guy, punk rock guy.
yeah.
But recently I've been listening to a lot of like neoclassical. I've been listening
Okay.
to more like musical, like shows from like Broadway shows and stuff like that
Okay.
to just get to just hear something different and
Yeah.
to see how maybe it could spark something. I like when something of one medium inspires me to make something in a completely different
Mm.
medium. So like a song inspires me to make a video, or a movie inspires me to write a poem, or
Yeah.
my version of a poem. I'm not a poet. I just write shit out. But something like, I like taking inspiration from things that aren't necessarily related to the piece of art that might come out of the inspiration.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's like part of your active learning too. I think
Oh yeah.
like I love that. I have such a wide array of music that I listen to. People are like, "God, your music library is just all over the place." I'm like, "It sure is.
Yeah.
It sure
My
is."
Spotify rap this year is like, what the hell happened, man?
What are you doing
Right.
with your time?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Taylor, I can't thank you enough for taking the time, walking me through all of the things that you are doing. If you guys do not follow Taylor, Scrap Productions, or the Film Nuts podcast, everything's going to be linked down below. Go check out everything he's doing. But Taylor, just thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.